News breaking in the last hour. Violent rhetoric directed at former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney by Donald Trump is now being investigated by Arizona law enforcement as a possible death threat. Here's how Vice President Kamala Harris responded to Donald Trump's remark that Liz Cheney should face, quote, rifles in her face.
He has increased his violent rhetoric, Donald Trump has, about political opponents, and in great detail, suggested rifles should be trained on former Representative Liz Cheney. This must be disqualifying. Anyone who wants to be president of the United States who uses that kind of violent rhetoric is clearly disqualified and unqualified to be president. Representative Cheney is a true patriot who has shown extraordinary courage in putting country above party. I have also thought a lot about what this means in terms of our standing in the world. As Vice President, I have represented the United States of America around the world. And what I know is that when we walk in those rooms representing the United States of America, we have the earned and self-appointed authority to then talk about the importance of democracy, the importance of rule of law. And as a result, people around the world who are fighting for freedom and opportunity hold us up as a model. America deserves better than what Donald Trump is offering.
All of this bringing us back, of course, to the choice facing we the people, the voters, in 4 days. We have heard now from the generals who served under Donald Trump, men like General Jim Mattis, General Mark Milley, General John Kelly. We have heard from former White House officials, aides like Olivia Troy, Miles Taylor, Sarah Matthews, Anthony Scaramucci. We have heard from Kevin Carroll, who told us on our air about his 5-year-old son who knelt and prayed at the grave of General Kelly's son to comfort him while Donald Trump sped away from Arlington National Cemetery after casually calling our veterans, quote, suckers and losers. We have heard from national security and intelligence chiefs, people who briefed Donald Trump inside the Oval Office. People like Sue Gordon, who warned us on our air yesterday that Donald Trump will make our nation less safe and alienate us from our intelligence allies all around the world. And now that Trump's rhetoric has veered into such dangerous territory that it is right now currently under investigation, I feel compelled to share the question I get asked more than any other when I'm off this set, which is this: where is George W. Bush? I understand better than most that these days he chooses to speak through his actions, through the incredible work of his library, to his daily dedication to democracy and honoring our country's wounded veterans. But these are the comments we're talking about right now in the United States of America from someone running to hold the job he had, to be our president. He said this about a critic and supporter of his opponent.
She's a radical war hawk. Let's put her with a rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her, okay? Let's see how she feels about it. You know, when the guns are trained on her face. You know, they're all war hawks when they're sitting in Washington in a nice building saying, oh, gee, let's send 10,000 troops right into the mouth of the enemy. But she's a stupid person.
So this morning, I re-upped my question to President Bush's office about whether anything might change his mind about staying silent ahead of the election next week. An advisor said he's not going to insert himself into this political moment, but in light of the violent nature of the threat toward his former vice president's daughter during the time she served him, and as a dad whose own daughter just last week bravely entered the political fray campaigning for Kamala Harris, I thought today it was important to share some of George W. Bush's past statements about what America does and what Americans do when they face threats.
Every milestone of liberty was considered impossible before it was achieved. In our time, we must decide our own belief. Either freedom is the privilege of an elite few, or it is the right and capacity of all humanity. There is a line in our time, and in every time, between those who believe that all men are created equal and those who believe that some men and women and children are expendable in the pursuit of power. There is a line in our time, and in every time, between the defenders of human liberty and those who seek to master the minds and souls of others. Our generation has now heard history's call, and we will answer it.
And on the work of his post-presidency, which is beautiful, honoring the men and women who have been wounded in the line of duty. Here's George W. Bush talking about that on the Today Show.
Our country is blessed to have people who are willing to sacrifice for something greater than themselves.
At a young age, I realized how lucky we were to live here, and I just wanted to give back.
I wanted to draw attention not only to their courage, but to the fact that they've contributed once and they need to know they can contribute again. People ask me, do you miss being president? The answer is not really. But I miss saluting people who volunteered to wear the uniform, and all 4 of them did. How can we help these great Americans transition from the military to civilian life? They've got visible wounds, they've got invisible wounds. But all 4 of these vets are willing to stand up and say, I had an issue, and I want to help somebody else.
He misses saluting the men and women of our military. Here's how General John Kelly describes a vote for Donald Trump when it comes to those men and women, how Trump views those men and women, the men and women George W. Bush lovingly paints and seeks to honor every day.
But he basically said to you that those who died for America on the battlefield were losers and suckers, and he said it more than once.
Yes, but he would say it would always, something else would get him going off at times. Again, McCain, he talked about, and it was like almost a recording, but the point is anyways, he would say it at times, sometimes unexpectedly, but he never could wrap his arms around why people would serve the country in uniform, what was in it for them. I think he just could never wrap his arms around why people would do things selflessly. What's in it for them? I think that's a much more powerful, but that's just me.
So today, we have a right to hope that those who have stood for freedom and celebrated those who have protected it might have a last-minute change of heart in the closing hours of this campaign. And because I once had the job of trying to convince President George W. Bush to sometimes do things he didn't want to do, I say this. On Election Day in 2004, while Air Force One sat parked on a tarmac because we decided we needed to beam into a half a dozen local television interviews in battleground states to help get out the vote, George W. Bush turned to me and the other communications staffers and said this, quote, "Whatever happens, Nicole, at least we will know we left everything on the field." I make this public plea to President George W. Bush in the spirit of doing what he taught me to do. Leave everything I know how to do in service of our democracy and freedoms, the things he taught us to cherish, on the field.